Hey everybody, my name is Mark. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's Menlo Midweek podcast. We have Matt Summers, campus pastor at Mountain View, and Josh Robertson, campus pastor at Saratoga, joining us as we kicked off our first week of our Advent series called Hope is Born. And if you want to kick off this Christmas season a little bit early and feel some of that magic, you got to check out our A Night of Carols Christmas service coming up this Friday night at the Menlo Park campus. It's going to be a wonderful time. We're going to hear and be able to sing along to some of our favorite Christmas songs and really get that magic of Christmas going. So we'd love to see you there. And now let's go ahead and jump into today's podcast. Well, welcome everybody to this week's Menlo Midweek podcast. My name is Mark. We got two friends with us today. We have Matt Summers.
Hey there.
And Josh Robertson.
Hey, y'all.
Man, it's great to have you both back on. Thanks so much for being here. Why don't you introduce yourselves for those that might not have known you, so how'd you get to Menlo? What do you do for Menlo? And we'll jump in from there because it was campus teaching weekend.
Sure was.
Which means we had Cheryl, and then your respective campuses had you. So Josh, let's start with you.
Yeah, name's Josh Robertson, campus pastor at our Saratoga campus. Been on staff. This month marks 5 years. So
No way.
Been 5 years at Menlo.
Cool, man.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. I'm Matt Summers, campus pastor at Mountain View. Excuse me. And I'm on for 4 years, coming up on 5 in March. So Josh and I, just a couple months apart from our hire date, have both stepped into the campus pastor role and have been through really interesting seasons together here at Menlo, which has been incredible. So deeply formative experiences. And I'm grateful for that.
Absolutely. Dude, we're both so glad, or we're all so glad to have you both. Matt, I've got to work with you before, which has been super fun. Yes. And Josh, I just hear amazing things about Saratoga and some of the work that you and the team have been doing down there. And so,
thanks, man. Mark, how long have you been on staff?
I've been on staff a little bit over 7 years now.
He's the veteran at the table.
I know,
seriously.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow I went from new guy to old guy, and not that long of a time.
Part of it is the life stage too.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm curious, as you have experienced many Christmases in and around Menlo, as we're gearing up towards Christmas and heading there, what were like childhood Matt and childhood Josh's view about Christmas and getting ready for it? So like for me, I was always the person that would like make the Christmas list and give it to my parents and be like, you don't have to get any of this, but it'd be really cool if you got this for me, like in tiered order. And then on Christmas morning, I would never, and still never, like look and peek at gifts until it's like gift time. So like my brother would always just walk down the stairs and like immediately try to open all of his presents. And I would like shield my eyes because my parents were like a little bit, I don't want to say rude, but we couldn't just go downstairs and open presents. It was like torture. We had to like, my mom made this awesome meal in the morning. So we'd eat breakfast and kind of slowly like see if we could get ready to have, gift opening time. Yeah. And then eventually we'd get to it. But I think over the years that's trained me to like not immediately look in Christmas morning at the presents downstairs. So what was Christmas like? What was the anticipation of Christmas like for you guys? And then what were your thoughts and feelings on Christmas morning?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in Tahoe, Truckee. So like we had like classic white Christmas, like tons of snow. We'd get snowed in and couldn't go to work or school like leading up to it. So it was always like sledding in the morning or snowboarding on the hill in the backyard. Like Christmas, I'm a lot like you. Like I was a rule follower. Okay. My older sister and younger brothers would be like, let's sneak down, open them up, rewrap them. No one will know. And part of me was like, you're like taking away the magic of all of this. Like, let's wait. Yeah. And then Christmas morning, I was very much like let's have a clipboard. Who was that from? Like, let's write a thank you card to like grandma, or like, okay, the next order. Who's the next oldest? Like there had to be structure. Yeah. Matt's like, he's not surprised by this right now. Like that's me.
I don't think a lot of people are.
So like there had to be structure.
Yeah.
And then when I opened something, I'd always put it in like a pile. I'm like, this is my pile. Christmas was structured, but it was still magical, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Definitely.
And then like leading up to it, I would say, like I wanted to soak up every minute of it. It was like we had to watch every Christmas movie. We had to make every Christmas cookie. We had to like we had to go Christmas, anything that was like Christmas related. we had to do, which is like, I'm still the same way now. Like Brett Corton, who's on our staff, is all about Hallmark movies. And I was like, oh man, I don't know what this is about. This is the first year that I'm deep into Hallmark movies. I was like, all right. Okay. So you have to do everything. It's kind of like my approach. Yeah. And it has to have structure.
Good for you.
That's so good.
I both feel like you're good for you. No judgment behind that at all.
Structure works for you. Yeah.
I'm so glad.
Yeah. I grew up in New York, and I would say, if Christmas had a capital, it would be New York City. Like every good Christmas movie, every good story kind of comes out of there. And we would do city trips around that time of year, just a one day to go see the tree and everything. I mean, I still remember first time as a kid going to see the tree at Rock Center, and I was like, oh my goodness, this thing's enormous. So I loved doing that. That was a lot of fun. Leading up to Christmas, Sears.
Wait, what's Sears?
Sears. Okay, so let me put this. If you're listening to the podcast and you're like, "What's Sears? I've never heard of that." It sounds like ears with an S at the front of it. Sears was Amazon at one point. Like it was maybe even arguably bigger at one point. Sears would publish this thing called the Wish Book every November, and it was a book, a chunky circular about this
like
thick.
A phone book.
Yeah.
So for those that are listening and wants to know what a phone book is.
Wait, yeah. What's
it's where you got your telephone numbers to call people. And a telephone is a phone.
Yes.
Okay.
Full color.
Yeah.
And it was basically everything that they were selling. And so like we would get the
full
Wish
color.
Book.
I like that.
It was good, like glossy pages, amazing. So we would open the Wish Book. We would fight over it, my brothers. We would fight over the Wish Book to look at it and like circle things and pick things out. And so we would just be so excited for the gifts leading up to Christmas. So we'd be highlighting things from the Wish Book. And then, I love Josh's structure. I think that's incredible. Oh. There was like the structure, sneaky. Yeah. There's like a sneaky part of me that would be like, I wonder where they're hiding the gifts this year, and like would try to like find out. A couple times I was successful, but mostly like I wouldn't find out. And I always wanted to be surprised before Christmas. I would find one and then like feel bad about it. So, leading up to it was always the excitement for the day of, and then coming from a ministry family, we always had to work and just be available for Christmas Eve for church stuff. So we would always get Chinese food on Christmas Eve.
Nice.
And that has been a tradition that we have kept in my household as well.
Too,
so
it's the best.
We pig out on Chinese food Christmas Eve.
This is like a random question.
Yeah.
I don't understand this whole Sears thing. Did you have to go and pick up a Wish Book at the store, or was it mailed to you?
That's a really good question. I don't know how much money they lost mailing this 10-pound
they mailed it? No
behemoth,
way.
But it would show up on our doorstep. My parents, they probably had like a Sears credit card or something, or one of those things where they just knew. Yeah. But like Sears and this other company, Service Merchandise, they would put out these full color books loaded with gifts, and we would just be stoked. And they would, not only would there be gifts, there would be descriptions of them. Like there'd be the price and like what it is, what it does. It was
that's
just
what
the
sunk
coolest.
Sears is the Wish Book cost. Is that what we're saying?
I think the Wish Book like excited people for gifts. I can't tell you what sunk Sears. I can tell you what didn't. It wasn't the Wish Book, and it wasn't Bob Vila, if you know who that is, and all the Craftsman
stuff. This is not what Mark
stuff.
Expected with this question. He's like,
I'm here for it.
Welcome to 90s Economics, your new podcast right now. I think, but Sears, pound for pound, I mean, they were incredible back in the day. They had everything in the store. First time I ever played a Super Nintendo, which I got from the Wish Book, was at Sears. I'll never forget it. They had a whole setup with the two controllers, and Super Mario World was in there, and I stood in front of that kiosk for an hour and a half while my parents walked around the mall to go shop for stuff, and I just played.
I think we took
Nintendo.
our family photos at Sears.
Yes,
like I'm not kidding.
It's a one-stop shop.
Oh man,
yeah, one-stop shop.
I have another New York Christmas question. How do they pick the tree for the Rockefeller Center?
That's really good. I don't know how they pick it. I only know like where they generally pull it from, and they'll pull it from what they call the tri-state area. So New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and there are trees that I do know people have submitted, and they'll keep a record of it. Like, hey, we've got this tree. Maybe it's not a good fit for this year, but maybe one day it'll be a tree. And I think the one they picked this year, I remember reading about it. It was on somebody's, the person who had submitted it or was aware of it, like they knew that it was destined for greatness or something. They basically said like this tree is gonna be a thing
One
sometime.
day you'll be a great tree.
That's really what it was. Yeah, and
Wow.
you're talking, the trees, like the whole East Coast, I feel like the scale is a lot smaller than the West Coast, especially around here. Our trees are huge. We have huge trees. It's not the same back East. And so it takes a longer time, I feel like, to grow some of these trees. And so you're talking about 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old trees in some case that they feature at this thing. And every year it's so majestic.
Wow.
Yeah. There's probably a Rockefeller Christmas tree board or something that picks this sort of thing.
I'll get you a calendar.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a perfect way that we can jump into our campus teaching from this past weekend where we kicked off our Advent series.
Yep.
And we looked at how Mary's life, like Josh was saying, was anything but structured, yet it still was magical. Yeah. And so we centered around week one, around hope being for Mary. And each campus got live preaching. We had Cheryl Fletcher at the Menlo Park campus. And then, Matt, you were able to speak for Mountain View. And Josh, you were able to speak for Saratoga. So, obviously, not everyone got to hear your messages. So I'd love for you all to just give a quick overview of your message. And then we can kind of draw some similarities. And then that can lead us from there. So, Matt, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. I love that we started with the story of Mary. I just want to say that because... so much, and rightly so, but so much fixation around Christmas is around Christ. And I get that and totally makes sense. Mm-hmm. But there are things that precipitated the arrival of Jesus to earth. And Mary really is a fixture, an enormous fixture in how that all came to pass. So we had, this is what we do when we do campus teaching. Phil gets us together and we sit and we examine the text. We look at it. We try to derive what it's saying, what it means for our context, all these things. That's very helpful to do. And so we all had we shared the same key principle and big question, which essentially was, what would you give up to give hope to others? Because that is really what Mary had to do. She surrendered so much of herself and her life. And in that process to bring hope, she had to lament and lose a part of what she expected her life to be, but still celebrated in the midst of all of that and found courage in the midst of sorrow. So really it's the story of Advent, the story of the arrival of Jesus and the pathway that it took to get there. So summarizing my message, I would say hope comes in really unexpected, mysterious ways, and it requires different things of us. Hope can bring curiosity and comfort. Hope will transcend our how, because sometimes we just find ourselves like, I don't know how this is going to happen, but I hope that it does. And then lastly, hope requires heartbreak. There's got to be some form of lament or loss, because the greater the need, the bigger the hope that you're going to have. So in broad strokes, that's how we summarize it, and all of those things contribute to the heart of hope.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, ditto.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. I mean, kind of the approach I took it was just the reality of, like, in order to bring hope bringers and to be people who extend love, like, we have to acknowledge and accept that there's a cost associated to it. So, like, for Mary, she brought Christ into the world, the ultimate source of our hope, which is what we're celebrating at Christmas. But we don't often think about, like, it came with a great cost for Mary. So I think to be people who extend hope into the world is acknowledging that it's going to cost us either our time, talent, treasure, reputation, relationships. And then just getting to the point where we have to acknowledge that there's a cost, and then acknowledging that maybe the ways that God is inviting us to being hope bringers is going to be potentially a way that we would not want it to be. So like for Mary, the thing that I kept pushing in my message was Mary had to have asked herself this question, like, is there another way? Like, God, there's this message being delivered to me. It's going to be a great source of comfort and hope for the entire world, all of humanity, for all of time. This is not a comforting message for me. It's going to cost something. Have you considered if there's another way? And I think that often that's how we approach God. It's, hey, God, here's how you can answer my question, or here's how you can answer my prayers, or here's how you should solve this problem. But to get to the point where it's, in order to be hope bringers, it's to acknowledge we have to be willing to sacrifice and give up something. And we have to acknowledge that God's ways are better than our ways. And they're often going to be uncomfortable and maybe in a way and through a method that we would not choose.
Can I just say too, that thing that you shared, Josh, of if there's another way, it reminds me of Jesus in the garden as well. This is, even Christ on earth, Emmanuel, God with us, was not exempt from that question to say, is there any other way? And to have hope in the midst of uncertainty, to have courage in the midst of sorrow, to lament but also trust are these tensions that are very, very hard to hold for people, especially around the holidays. And let's just acknowledge and call it what it is. The holidays cause a ton of baggage in our lives, right? If you've lost a loved one, the holidays are so hard. If you grew up in a crazy household, the holidays are tough for you because you don't know what to feel. You're excited for the season maybe because maybe now you're in a safe place, but the memories and all those things that happened to you before still sting and they hurt and they cause us to spiral. So this season stirs up so much internal psychological and emotional strife that to try and process a way to have hope in the midst of that, to be a hope bringer or a hope bearer, it can feel impossible at times. And I think for both of us, when we were communicating to our campuses, we just wanted to name that tension and to have people feel seen in the midst of this season, because it is so hard to take yourself outside of yourself in the midst of that.
Yes. How did you all encourage people to, one, name that tension, and then two, move towards accepting that in order for us to maybe make a difference in the world around us, it will come at a sacrifice to us? Yeah. 'Cause that's not a fun Christmassy message that y'all preached. Yeah. That is a grown-up
Everyone
reality.
Cheered when I said it. I don't know how you did it. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is what I tried to communicate is when we become followers of Jesus, this is what we're signing up for. Yeah. Be a hope bringer and to be a follower of Jesus is not signing up for a life of easy. We're signing up for a life of being obedient to what God calls us to. And that requires sacrifice. It requires often difficulty. It requires us living uncomfortable. It requires us doing things that we wouldn't want to choose to do. So I think if we were to say this is what we have to do, then we're missing the point. I think the better question of this is who we're called to become.
Yes.
And when we lean into that, it's cool, there's going to be moments that I fail. And there's going to be moments that I step into this identity, but it's a lifelong journey of transformation into becoming who God has called me to be. It's not about doing something. That's how I kind of approached it.
That's great. I love that. Yeah. I think for me, I resonated so deeply understanding Mary's story. I told the congregation, I did two things when I was researching this message. I listened to Let It Be by the Beatles a lot, which I thought was appropriate. And the second thing was I looked into Mary's name and what her name means. And in the Hebrew language, there are two definitions for it, beloved and bitter. And it's interesting, those seem like very different meanings. And to be beloved means to find favor and to have privilege and to know that you are seen and cared for. But also there's a bitterness, almost a sourness to this life and the challenges of it. And so I sort of leaned into that and the maternal aspect when sharing it with people, because being a mom is hard. You have all this gladness and goodness for seeing your child grow and be fulfilled, and yet it's so hard when you see them struggle or stumble. You're trying to balance exhaustion with energy. You're feeling this constant push-pull tension that's happening all the time. And so when I see Mary, I see the love and I see the loss. I see the hope and I see the struggle. And I think that it is just a very human experience in this world to try and bring those things together in a way that feels consistent, and then bringing that to God and saying, how do I hope in the midst of all of this? And how do I trust you? And so the question I pose at the end is, in the midst of all of this, as we're balancing this, because each one of us, even if we're not moms, we're struggling through in some way, shape, or form. Do we really trust God enough to bring all of these things and say, can you give me hope in the midst of all that? And can I bring hope to others? So I think really her story, and this is the power of story and the power of Scripture, is so much of it makes it applicable to where we are in our struggle, and it takes one small niche of a person and it brings it to light and brings it alive in ways that we didn't anticipate. I am nothing like Mary, but I can still see myself in her life and experiences, and I wanted people to feel that same thing when they heard the story.
Yeah. It's really interesting because it feels like as we're reading through these stories, we live such separate lives from all the characters that we will be studying, yet there are glimpses in which we are the same people. And for us to call that out and one, just name some of the tensions, and that's really interesting about her name. Like I didn't know that. That's fascinating. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's even though this person's light years removed from where we are now, seeing the similarities in which what she felt and how we can sometimes feel similar. It's super interesting. Yeah. I loved how each one got to contextualize their message. And so I'm going to ask you, Matt, about being an EV car owner and your trip to Disneyland. And I'm going to ask you, Josh, about your Letterman's jacket.
Oh,
so who wants to go first?
I didn't hear, I mean, I know of the story, Josh, but I don't know how it actually integrated fully into the message and how you preached it. I would love to hear.
Yeah, this podcast is 2 hours, right?
Yeah. I think you should take that first because mine's like way lighter and a little more pithy. So I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I kind of like I set up the story of this Letterman's jacket, the start, and then left everyone kind of on a cliffhanger and then closed it at the end. But I also preached in it, like I wore it the whole time.
Okay. So it was like an actual Letterman's jacket.
It was like my Letterman's jacket from high school. So yeah, the story, essentially at the beginning, I just kind of gave some context to my family growing up. It was like, hey, dad's a pastor's kid, grew up in a small town in Truckee, Tahoe. It was a logging town. It was a railroad town. Like no one had money. But my high school career, like I did year-round sports, and it felt like freshman year, all of my friends got Letterman's jackets. And then sophomore year, more people got them. Junior year, everyone got them. And for me, like this kind of dumb jacket made me feel like an outcast because my family just couldn't afford it. So all my friends on game days or like homecoming or school events would be like rocking their Letterman's jacket with their patches and their awards. And I'm sitting there like, I'm just happy to be invited, like hanging out. Yeah. But I felt super, super hopeless. And there was nothing I can do to like feel included and feel valued and like feel part of it. And so I kind of like told the church, like, obviously I got a jacket, I'm wearing it, but I'm going to tell you at the end, like what happened. So I really tried to communicate how I felt hopeless and the emotions behind not having it. And then at the end, I showed a picture and I'll be honest, I cried. I got emotional just because I showed some pictures that I've never seen until I got from my dad this week at Thanksgiving. Whoa. But the way that I like got this jacket is there was a women's ministry in my dad's church growing up. All older women, most of them widows, living on a fixed income, like no money. But they were super invested in like my sports career, which is crazy because I was terrible. but they would always ask questions like, how was football? Like, how was your game? And if there was ever an article in the newspaper, they'd cut it out and show it to me at church. Like, hey, we read about this. They'd come to my games on Friday night, like in the snow in Tahoe to watch us. Like super invested into my life. And these women, one Sunday, like invited my entire family up on stage during Sunday announcements. And they just showed, like, they just wanted to communicate their appreciation for my dad and like my family of what they were doing, like what we were doing to kind of speak value and our investment into the church. And then, there was a woman named Tony, and I showed a picture of her. She was kind of like the unofficial leader of this group. And so she asked my whole family to step off stage, and she's like, Josh, can you stay? And then she invited 4 or 5 other women on stage, and one of them was carrying this giant box. And I opened it up on stage, and it was this Letterman's jacket.
Wow.
And so I got to open it, and I'm in front of like my dad's church and my family just crying. And I'm like 17 years old, just bawling. And I actually found out 15 years later, and this is the picture that I showed, these women, this group of women, they saw like how hopeless I felt. Like they saw that I didn't have this jacket. They could tell that I felt less than, that I wasn't included. And so they asked themselves this question. They just said, how can we bring hope to this? How can we bring hope to Josh when he feels hopeless? So what these women did is they pooled what little money they had on their fixed income. They bought all of the ingredients to make peanut brittle. And then they spent an entire weekend making peanut brittle. Then they went door to door or to arts and crafts fairs in Northern California, selling peanut brittle with one goal, which was to buy me this jacket. And so like they didn't tell me that, but my dad told me like 15 years later. And then so on Sunday in the sermon, I had a picture of these women making this peanut brittle. So I just ended it with like my sermon saying, here is this hopeless teenager. And these women and saying, what would we be willing to give up in order to give hope to Josh was, we'll give what little money we have, use our time, make peanut brittle, and sell it with one goal, which is to get Josh a Letterman's jacket. Mm-hmm. So I preached in this jacket, the exact jacket, the whole morning. And like I think I got emotional talking about it because all of those women are with Jesus now. Like they've all passed away. But like it came with such sacrifice. They like gave up so much so that I felt seen and valued and loved. So like that jacket, I mean, it barely fits, but I still keep it. My wife is like, why do you still have that? I'm like, this is kind of a stake in the ground object for me of like, God spoke value over me through these women. And like, everyone's crying in the sanctuary and I'm crying. I'm like, dang it. And then the next service, I was like, I'm not going to cry. I still cried. But it just was like, here's people who gave everything so that I felt a little bit of hope. Wow. And it was really special.
I think I'd watch that Hallmark movie.
It's going to be coming out in 2026.
That's a great idea for a Hallmark movie.
Right?
That's a great idea.
It's called The Peanut Brittle Letterman.
A peanut brittle Christmas. I had secretly wished that you had had a stick of peanut brittle in the jacket, like from that era, and been like, and one more thing, and just it's like rock hard.
You get peanut brittle. You get peanut.
Reach under your seat, everyone. Pull out some peanut brittle.
Instead of an Advent candle, we're going to be lighting peanut brittle.
It would smell amazing, actually, to cook peanut brittle. That's just I kind of want peanut brittle now.
Yeah,
that's a really touching story, man. I love that. That's beautiful. And also, I can't help but envision. I don't know why. Why is it the cast of Golden Girls? But it's them cooking this peanut brittle for you to make this jacket. I love it though. That's really precious. It's very special, and I'm sure people just felt not only moved by the story, but probably encouraged. Of like, all it took was like time, sacrifice, peanut brittle. Like it. These were ladies who were widows, fixed income, whatever, and they still found a way. So if I'm there sitting and listening to your message, I'm thinking, okay, what is the gesture that I could give that is still within my means to bless someone else and to bring hope to someone else? That's a great way to reference it.
I think like the value of that story in the conversations I had, like post-service in the courtyard or in the sanctuary, it was like, we shouldn't assume what it means for someone to experience hope. Like for me as a high schooler, hope meant a jacket.
Right.
Hope for Mark Morinishi in the season and stage of life that he's in might mean something different.
Yes.
So I think just to know, like, being a hope bringer doesn't have to mean this big world-changing thing in our minds. It could be a small gesture that's world-changing to that person. So it doesn't have to be as difficult as we think.
I'm struck by their insight. Like, I'm struck that a group of elderly women would know a 17-year-old kid, be able to know him well enough to figure out what makes him sad and what makes him feel outcasted.
Yeah.
And for them to key in on that and then act on that, like that's crazy to me.
Yeah. I mean, it must have been because they really knew you.
Yeah.
They were invested, for sure. Which is even just that, like to have people invested in something that I valued, which was sports, meant the world. Yeah.
Wow. That's beautiful.
I didn't bring it. I'm sorry. The jacket's back at home.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a relic, more or less, in your household. I think you should only leave the house for serious reasons.
Yeah. Instead of a star on top of my tree, it's just my jacket. So.
Why is Dad cooking in the jacket again? Just flipping pancakes every morning in the jacket.
It's my Saturday leisure wear.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Thanks for sharing, man.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah. So the question, again, Mark, if you could rephrase for me, it was...
everyone got to illustrate this a little bit differently. And so for Josh, that meant a jacket. What illustrations did you pull on from your life that spoke to the Mountain View community about pointing back towards hope?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I'll say this. If I could share a different analogy, actually, than one you referenced previously. 2009, New Year's Eve, my wife and I come home from a celebration, and this is 2 months after our wedding day, and I just had this feeling, like this sense, and so did she, that like something was internally happening with her, like something was brewing or cooking, more or less. And she's like, I think I might be pregnant. I'm like, I think you might be too. It's entirely possible. So, after the holiday, scheduled an appointment, went to the radiologist, and the image on screen is there. You can't deny that. And then hearing, yeah, it looks like a healthy baby girl. And that was a big deal for us because separately, due to previous circumstances, we had both been told well before we had been married or really even knew each other that we would struggle with fertility issues. And so we were not trying to conceive at that time, and yet we still did. And so I was filled with equal parts joy and gladness, and also fear and terror. And, maybe that's, I don't think I'm anywhere near the scope or the holiness or preciousness of the Virgin Mary, but that's that's like my Virgin Mary moment of being like, oh my goodness, this angel is visiting me and telling me like my life is going to be different. And I'm glad and also scared at the same time. And that's kind of what that came out of, because I was 26 years old. So, and Michelle was 22, about to turn 23. So, I mean, we're just young. Yeah. And that was not the trajectory that we had foreseen in our life. In fact, we were kind of making peace with the plan that maybe we wouldn't be parents. And yet here is the place where we found ourselves. And so, hope is complicated. It brings this incredible, curiosity and wonder and comfort, and also like a little bit of like, how is this going to happen? So I think for me, I found hope in the fact that something I wasn't expecting was still going to happen. And I found solace in trusting God in that process, because again, we just were not expecting that was going to be a reality for us. And, hope arrives in different ways. It arrived in different ways for Mary, for Elizabeth, for every single person in that narrative. And I think for our lives, it's the same way too.
I think you used the line early in this podcast, as well as in your message, that hope requires heartbreak.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure separately, you and Rochelle probably felt a bit of heartbreak around not potentially being able to have kids.
Yeah.
And so what else do you talk about? Like, I find that line striking. And so I've thought about it for about 10 minutes now. You've thought about it for a lot longer than that. What else can we unpack about hope requiring heartbreak?
Yeah. I mean, I think it has power because it acknowledges the reality and presence of pain. And so I think when things are generally good, you don't need to hope as much. You don't find yourself hoping when everything's okay. So there's got to be some sort of loss, some lament, some trouble for you to even feel or be maybe more aware of the need for hope in your life. And so I tried to make that as applicable as possible. And I thought about the story of Elizabeth actually in that text where, the angel comes to Mary and says, your relative Elizabeth is in her 6th month of pregnancy. Elizabeth was, from what we know in the story, older beyond childbearing years. She hadn't had a baby. And so for her, she probably, my guess is, I don't know her firsthand, but my guess is like there probably came a point in her life where she stopped praying to have a child. And yet now here she is pregnant beyond all, what was socially and biologically impossible is now possible with God. And so I think I wanted to communicate what I saw the text saying to people out there, which whatever your heartbreak is, whatever you're carrying in the midst of it right now, the angel's words are true for you, and that is nothing is impossible with God. So that's what I found most profound in the meaning of that. So, that's how I feel the heartbreak is necessary to understand hope and to be aware of it and to receive it.
That's great.
Like one of the things that was left on kind of the cutting floor for my sermon, I didn't phrase it that way, but not really heartbreak, but there's a sense of hope where you have to learn and accept that you're not in control. So I think it's like for Mary was to realize I have to trust in a method that I don't understand, that I can't control, or I have to trust in a God that I don't fully understand, that I have questions about. So there's a level of heartbreak in accepting that this is greater than you and you can't control it and you might just be a vessel. And so I think that's hard because I think hope and even just faith in general requires a level of acceptance of like, you have to give up and you have to have open hands and you have to acknowledge that you are not steering the ship. And so I think it opens up deeper things. And I left it on the cutting floor because I'm like, oh, if we talk about control, then we're going to have to go this direction. No, it's a 2-hour sermon. But I think the level of heartbreak that Mary must have felt was to acknowledge that she didn't have control and it required her to completely give up control, knowing at great cost.
Yeah.
And that has to be super hard.
Yes. Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah. We got one text-in question, and I should have prepped you guys on this beforehand. I'm sorry. But it was basically centering around the idea of bringing this story to someone that is unchurched, someone that doesn't understand, and probably has some issues with a virgin birth and the story of Mary. How do you coach people along in that to help understand or help explain this to people that they might see as they're talking about this, something that we trust in and don't really necessarily bat an eye at, but to others could be such a striking red flag?
Yes.
Yeah. Matt, we'll start with you.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll talk to the camera for a minute because I think whoever's asking this question, I think it's a great one to ask. And I would say what many more Christian theologians and other people have said way more eloquently than me, which is you might be the best representation of Jesus to this person more than any other scripture or anything else. So how you are relating and connecting to them is going to be the most important thing, really. And so start with the relationship. Start with building that mileage in. And if you love this person and want to see this person grow spiritually, or you know that that their life is sort of destined for a walk with Jesus, start walking with him. Just stay next to him the whole time in the process of that. And then to the more unbelievable aspects of it, to the idea of a virgin birth. Christmas is the best time to believe in unbelievable things. And I just said this, every single movie that's out there right now, even the ridiculous Hallmark movies about
the one about the guy getting the jacket with the peanut brittle money. I think I've seen that
one.
Peanut brittle Christmas. That's a tongue. Peanut brittle Christmas.
We'll work on the title.
Yeah. Even the most ridiculous Hallmark stories that are out there about finding love in unexpected ways, all the way from, stories like the Polar Express. And I mentioned this too, it's the holiday season is, it's loaded with stories that stoke our interest. An old, elderly, grumpy man who is visited in the middle of the night by 3 different spirits to tell him his past, present, his future. An enchanted wardrobe that opens up to a land that is always winter and never Christmas. Or a platform at a train station called 9 3/4, where you step through it and all of a sudden magic is real. All of these stories help us recognize what is unbelievable and to see what is possible. And so there's something about this season where people want to see the supernatural and the natural intersect, and to believe or be open to the idea of believing that some things are extraordinary rather than just ordinary is exciting. And so I want to foster and nurture and cultivate that idea. And all of these stories are drawn from the singular narratives that come out of Scripture where the unbelievable happened and what was previously thought impossible was possible with God. So to me, Christmas is the best time to lean into the unique sense that comes with this season.
As you're talking, what you described through the magic of Christmas is essentially what makes hope. You are believing in something that is not yet, that can be, and you feel like ought to be.
Yes.
And putting your trust that it can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's good.
Josh, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, so the question is, how would you engage with someone who maybe struggles with? Yeah, I mean, I'll just use an example. I mean, I feel like Matt actually communicated it really well, and so I don't want to take away anything from that. But I had a conversation after one of the services with someone in the courtyard who or on our campus that's not a follower of Jesus, that had some questions. And in the sermon, I used an or a Tim Keller quote from The Reason for God. And in the quote, he essentially says, like, the miraculous birth of Jesus had to be miraculous so that people could form the conclusion that only God. Like, I'm completely butchering that quote. I am so sorry, everyone.
Tim Keller's just rolling over in his grave.
But it just was like, but it's just the point of, like, it had to be this way so that people had to have the posture and the conclusion of, like, only God can do this. And this person who the conversation I had was, hey, I'm still curious about this. I'm going to keep coming. I'm going to keep exploring. But it was actually comforting to know, like, yeah, I have questions about the virgin birth. But what is also comforting is understanding that God is so big that I will not always have the answers. Like, I'd rather explore and be curious about a God that's so big that I'm going to always be on this journey than being able to go, at what point will I fully understand everything about God? So I would say, like, hey, this is something to explore, and we'll never have all the answers, but we're exploring this together. And wouldn't you rather pursue a God that's big that you'll never fully understand than a small God that you can fully comprehend? And for like this person, it was just comforting to know, like, this God is not limited by something, and that was comforting for them. Which I don't know why, but it was. And I'm like, hey, that's great that was your takeaway. I'm like, something about the divine conception and birth of Jesus helped you reach the conclusion that we're worshiping a God that's huge, like that is big, that is of a magnitude that you'll never fully comprehend. And that was like, oh, I want to explore it more. It's like, great. I'm glad that was your takeaway for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool.
I think that there's, like, I'm glad that you met that person where they were, and it speaks to what I think is a very, like, inner human wiring issue of the soul wants to believe in something supernatural. Even the head and the heart might not let us, though. There are barriers and things that get in the way of that. And I think for those of us out there, and I don't fault anyone for feeling this way, but for just seeing the physical plane and saying, these are the answers, this is as far as we can go, I just feel like the universe is a very small and dark and kind of boring place. And to be open to the idea that impossible things are possible, to be open to the idea of having a God who is over us. Even in the text, like it says, the power of the Most High will overshadow you. To be overshadowed in your life means you have this big, enormous, huge presence that you didn't previously anticipate. There's a part of me, I want life to be interesting. I want to be overshadowed. And I think the better we can, stoke that interest within people, speaks to their souls.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, anything else? Thoughts on Christmas, helping people in our communities hold on to the hope that Jesus is coming, hold on to the hope that Mary shared. Any last ways we can encourage our community?
Yeah, I think, like, one of the challenges I gave at the very end was just, hey, take a step in living beyond beyond yourself. Okay. So, like, there's ways that we're doing this as a church, but you don't have to be a part of Menlo to do that. But it's just, Christmas, we tend to be, like, very me-centered. Like, here's my list from the Sears Wish Book, or, like, here's what we're going to be. But I think just to say, hey, is there a way that you can live beyond yourself this season? Like, is there something you can do for your neighbor? Is there something you can do for your classmate? So just to step into I'm going to sacrifice something for the sake of someone else that I interact with on a normal day, and just to try it. Like, just take a step. That could be bringing a meal to the person next to you. It could be making some extra cookies to bring to your classmate. But just explore what it looks like to sacrifice something for the benefit of someone else and invite God into that process. Like, just take a step.
That's so good. Yeah. Same, exactly. And I think those small gestures, if you don't know where to start, see who or what is in your life where there's a void. It could be an elderly neighbor who's alone during the holidays. It could be a single mom, or it could be a stranger. Whatever you're going to do to make a difference in the life of that person, be it a small gesture, you could plant an enormous seed of hope that's going to grow into something incredible. And so, just being open to that idea of bringing hope to others by giving up something is exactly what we wanted to communicate for this season. And that's embedded in Christmas in and of itself, right? Like it cost my parents money to go through the wish book and to find a gift for me, to make all of my dreams come true the years that I got that Super Nintendo for Christmas in 1991. I mean, that changed my life, in a really amazing way. Now I'm being facetious here about the gifts, but I mean, it did say something to see another person, to know what they greatly desired, and to bring hope to them in the form of a Letterman's jacket or whatever way. And that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful gift that we can give to others, especially in this time of the year.
That's great. Well, thank you both for being on. Yeah. We have a lot of things going on around Christmas time here at Menlo. I'm hoping that everyone listening to this will come on Friday night to our Christmas service, a night of carols.
Yes.
That's kicking off. It's our classic Christmas sing-along event that we're doing at the Menlo Park campus. It's going to be awesome. My parents are going to come, hopefully.
Nice.
Shout out Mom and Dad. Yeah, they're going to come up and visit. So that'll be really cool. What's going on in Mountain View? What's going on in Saratoga?
Yeah, I mean, I would also say like night of carols, we're streaming it. So if you want to stay in your pajamas and drink hot cocoa, you can totally do that from home. That. So that's an option. I'd say our big thing right now is we're doing Help One Child. I know we're doing that at all of our campuses, but we are collecting gifts. They're going to go directly to kids in the foster care system right here in the Bay Area.
Yep.
So people can get all that information on our website. But I think that's just a really easy next step, like we talked about, is you can buy a gift that's going to meet a very real need for a kid who's saying, what's Christmas going to look like this year? And it's very low cost. So that's something we're doing.
Yeah.
And we're doing that at all campuses.
Yeah. We've got that happening at all campuses. Yeah, that's actually, we're coming pretty close to wrapping it up, actually.
Yeah, this Sunday.
But I would say, at Mountain View, we've got the drive-through food pantry, which around this time of year, we're seeing a lot more families come through and individuals who need something a little extra. And usually it's just food, but we find a way to give gifts and other things like that. So we're always open for folks who want to serve there. You can go on our website and sign up as an event. But I would say if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, I don't know anything about this church, I'd like to get to know it a bit more, this Sunday might be for you, as we're having Discover Menlo at all of our campuses after our last service there. So you can sign up or you can show up. We'd love to have you either way. And you'll get to hear a little bit more about who we are as a church and what we're about and what we're looking forward to in the coming season. Yeah. So I'd say Discover Menlo is a big deal. And I'll give a shout out for the Night of Carols as well over at Menlo Park. I've gone every single year. We've had it in person since I moved here. Yeah. And I always love it. I would say if you're going to go, get there early. Find parking, because this is one time of the year where it's always packed out. It's always chaotic and crazy. So get a good seat. It's enjoyable. This is fun. I mean, you could turn on a Hallmark movie or you could stream in your pajamas, but if you want to if you want to get out of the house for a little while, you want to tap into that Christmas spirit early and get a little sense of wonder and awe and feel something in this season, come out to that night. It's going to be special.
It is. Well, Josh, thank you for being on.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Matt, thanks so much as well.
Thanks.
If you're listening to this and you need any prayer or encouragement this week, you can reach out to our team. We'd love to walk alongside you through whatever you're going through. 650-600-0402. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you Friday night. Bye, everybody.